Everybody, Scout Crafty here again. Another beautiful day, absolutely gorgeous, 70 degrees and nice breeze. Today I want to talk about a few different things before we get started on a tool. One of them is banks. I don't know, do you remember years ago there was an old custom of saving money? People don't really do that much anymore, the kids. But I remember when I was younger, every penny or dime or nickel went into a bank. And it helped us save a little bit of money back then, but let's check out a few of the old ones.
Now, back in the early and mid 1800s, they used to come out with these cast iron banks. These were really collectible back about 1970 or something. This is a reproduction of a bank that was quite expensive back then, if you could find the original. But these were all made from cast iron, even the reproductions. And this is called the trick dog. I'll show you how this works. Now here, what you would do is you would take a coin, place it into the dog's mouth like this, and press the lever on the side, and it will go through the hoop and deposit the coin into the barrel. And it always works, and I find it pretty amazing because with that kind of spring that it doesn't launch the coin across the room. We go once again. Never misses.
Now I still have my dad's bank in the attic that he had when he was a kid. This thing counts up to $10 and then gives you your money.
By the late 50s and 60s, this bank started coming out. This was a steel safe bank, and it was actually made of steel, had a combination, and you could see here it had a you can open it up and put some valuables in there, and had a little slot there that you can put your change and things like that. And these were pretty interesting, and I love this crinkle finish, you know. You used to see that back in the late 50s, early 60s, but nice little banks that they used to have for kids to save. By the 70s, they were starting to phase out anything metal, and you could see that this was no exception. Here was a bank that was made of like a kind of a softer plastic, but this was a nice quality plastic as far as the colors not fading and stuff. And you might recognize this as being Fred Flintstone. Now, some companies used to incorporate banks into their products. Like here, Log Cabin syrup used to come in tins, you know, back then, years ago. And back in 1979, they came out, they reintroduced the tin as a bank. You could see here, so after you finish using it for syrup, you rinsed it out, wash it out, and you could use it as a bank. But then they did the same thing again in '87, but look, they forgot the bank top, so all it is it's a tin, you know. I guess it's display, but you know, banks were pretty much a part of growing up for me, and I know for a lot of you.
Okay, we're back in the shop, and for today's project, we're going through. I got a lot of viewer projects to tackle, but one of our friends from the show for a long time is a gentleman by the name of Brian Paine. Brian was also already featured on the show one episode before. He sent in a bunch of tools. He sent in some more tools. They were his grandfather's, and he has duplicates. His grandfather was a big tool collector and had some really nice stuff. So Brian says, I got duplicates and everything of these, but he just likes seeing them restored and whatever and put to use. So let's go check out what Brian sent and what we can do.
Now, these tools we already have left over from the last time Brian sent in, and it's a really nice, that I've used actually a couple times, a really nice clamp and some shears. But today he sent a package. Look at some of these beautiful tools he sent here. First of all, we have a perfect handle wrench. You know, we all know about perfect handle and how nice these are. But this is I've been letting this settle because, you know, the wood has to settle to your environment. So that's not today. Sent in some really nice smaller, which I love doing these, the small ones, because they're just so cute, you know. And this one here, these are actually two Walworth company, kind of a set of smaller pipe wrenches. Also has a nice Tremont wrench here, and look at all the embellishments here. How nice will that be with all the color and everything? And that's a really great wrench to do. And then we have a beautiful, who doesn't love an adjustable crescent more than I do? I don't know anybody. And then sent two ball peen hammers. Now, I haven't done a hammer in a while. Everybody loves a hammer, especially a ball peen. And I promised I was going to show about hanging hammer on a handle and things like that. And this is I thought maybe a good candidate. It's rough, and I want to use the handle. You know, I don't want to replace the handle. I want to, and this one would be good for that. So this is actually a Billings, and if you look, you see here it's stamped Billings. So whoever mounted this head, they put it on upside down, and I'll show you why. There is a right way and a wrong way. Now, if you were at a flea market or a yard sale or something and you saw this hammer, I don't care if it was $1 or 50 cents, this is not a hammer you would buy because there are so many problems with this hammer. It's not, I mean, for a ball peen hammer, you can pick these up inexpensively, else, you know, cheap. But Brian knows we like a challenge here, and this is what a better challenge, right? Look at the head, the mushrooming of the head, right? Look at that. I mean, that's pretty bad. And then, of course, we have the handle. You know, to take off a handle and try and remount the same handle is always a nightmare. And then look at the sides. You know, somebody was banging on the sides, and you know, it's just a little bit of work involved. So, but again, that's what we do here. So let's get started. First thing we want to do is try and remove this head off of this handle.
Now, the first thing we're going to do is cut off the little tip on top of the hammer, and luckily there was no metal wedges in there, or else you'd have to pull them out. Then what you do is you take an old, I'm using a rawhide hammer here, and just you take it upside down and alternately hit each end of the hammer, and eventually it'll start working its way off. Now, this is actually, you know, a tedious way to do it.
Or you could use the dake, everybody's favorite. We got it, we might as well use it, especially since you love seeing it. So you can see we got the hammer sitting in there, and I'll show you the setup. Okay, here's the setup. We're going to take an old bolt. We have this old bolt. We're going to place this above the handle, and then we're going to press it down, and we're going to have to hold the bottom of the handle so it don't wander, because this is a ball peen hammer, and it has round edges, and it tends to want to roll a little bit. So once we get pressure on that bolt, we'll hold the bottom handle so it won't spin from side to side, and we'll just push it down. And let's see, we just don't want this to spin out on us, but as you can see, it's coming out, and that's why you have a dake. And we just keep pressing it down. It's coming out, it's working its way out, but again, I'm holding the handle. Now we got to be careful when it gets to the bottom that it doesn't. Here we go. All right, now we hold this, wiggle it, and there's the handle. Another good reason to own a dake. Okay, next up, that was real satisfying, taking this off. Now you see over here, we're going to have to take care of all this. We're going to flatten this out a little bit. And to do that, we're going to take the nice Stanley 700. We're going to mount this in here. Like I said, such a handy vise, right? And then we're going to take the angle grinder, and we're just going to grind this down. There's no sense in wasting belts on this, you know, because we got a lot of metal to take off. So let's get started.
Now, if you notice here, I hung up the fire blanket off to the right, so any of these sparks won't ignite my shop. So they'll just bounce off that fire blanket. And then we took it over to the belt sander and started getting all that off.
Okay, once you have your hammerhead about 90% done, came out nice, right? I was able to keep the Billings, which I'm shocked, but so we're about 90% done with this and happy where it's coming. Now we start fitting the handle. Now what we do is it came off of here, but we sanded down because it was too high up. We wanted to see the shoulder here. There's a shoulder on the wood of a handle that you want this to rest so it can't come down any farther. So you always make sure, if you don't have, this one has a little bit of a proud section on the handle, but if you don't, you just mark it with a pencil or something like that, so you're always going in the same way. Place this in here and wiggle it back and forth a few times, and just try and fit it on and pull it out, and you'll see markings over here. You'll see shiny spots where it's touching, you see here, and then you just give it a little scrape off and get rid of those shiny spots until you get that handle down to fit where you want. See, here's some more shiny spots, and what's doing is you're fitting this handle, you're getting it down to so it rests on here without having too much slop. Okay, it goes in this way. Push it down like this, and we're going to keep fitting it like this until we get this down around here somewhere before we start sanding. And that'll fill in all these little gaps on the bottom. Once these gaps are filled on the bottom, then we'll put a wedge in. That'll fill in the gaps on the top. This is also where you're going to have to custom, if you want to do any custom. I always like my hammers to have like a 2-degree drop in the tip. That's just my personal preference. I don't like them level across. I like them to just dip down a little bit in the front. So that's where you're going to have to make and see what you can do here. Now, I've been trying to fit it to give myself just a little bit on the bottom. And what you do is you tap the bottom here with a hammer. that'll seat. That's what seats the hammerhead, and you could see I have just a little bit of a tilt, and that's what I'm looking for. And if you want a tilt in the back or whatever your preference is, you just have to remove a little bit more wood there so it sits right. But you could see we're getting very close to having a nice fit on there, and then I'll show you the next. Once you're happy with the placement of the hammerhead on the handle. Now again, this handle, believe me, you know, I see this, you know, a little crack here and stuff, but we're keeping this handle. That was what we decided. We're going to make this hammer, you know, restoring a hammer without replacing, like we said in the beginning. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a pencil, we're going to mark it here. You see how we filled in the gap on the bottom? It's nice and tight. We're going to take a pencil, we're going to run a pencil around here so we know where it is, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, next up what we're going to do, you see we drew that line. That's right where the bottom of the hammerhead sits, which is nice. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take where the middle of the hammer would be, right where the center of the hammer would be, and we're going to drill a hole. That where that line is where the center of the hammer will be. We're going to drill a hole right through, going this way, going across this way. We're going to drill a hole, and I'll then take a saw and cut the saw straight down here to the hole. The hole stops the splitting from going anymore, and the top will accept the wedge when we put the wedge in. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we have our nice slot in here. Remember, the hammer comes down to about here, but we're going to make a long tapered wedge that'll fill that whole void in and also separate a little bit to fill up. Then we'll scrape down the hammer handle, and we'll be ready to do our finishing assembly. Now, a properly designed hammer has a bit of an hourglass design. You could see here inside the cavity. And that's so that when you put the hammer handle in, the bottom wedge will wedge up against this slightly larger area here. And then the top wedge will open up the top and it will lock it into the hammerhead. And that's why a properly designed hammerhead is not a straight hole right through the hammer, but it has a little bit of an hourglass. That's a little bit exaggerated, but it should look like that. Now, I like to make my wedges out of poplar, and you see it's not, some of the wedges you buy are extremely angled, and I don't like that. I like to keep an angle. I just want to widen it enough that it fills that gap, and I want this to go down as far as possible, and that's why this gap, that'll do that perfectly. So we make this as wide as the hammer hole, and now we'll just drive it, and I drive it in with a little glue. One last tip before we do the final assembly, I will coat this part, just the top here, with boiled linseed oil. That'll seal it so that it doesn't shrink or contract or anything, but this wood is dry anyway. So I'll coat this with linseed oil, and then I'll put it into the handle, and then I'll put the wedge. Now, once we installed the wood wedge in lengthwise, we trimmed it close, then we inserted a steel wedge widthwise, and that expanded it. So you see there's no gaps around the top. It's just beautiful. This is a well set hammer, and you can see here there's no gaps on the bottom. This is a solid hammer, should last for another 100 years, and I'm really liking it. Now I just got to do something for the handle. Handle's all sanded and ready for some kind of stain, shellac, varnish, whatever I'm going to
Now, you know my favorite part. Remember what this hammer looked like before we started.
And we are calling this project done. I have to tell you something. This was a very rewarding project. Remember one thing: the greater the challenge, the greater the reward. Because you know, when you start off with something that's a real mess, and you can make it really nice, that's where the reward comes in. And as you can see here, it's all done up, polished, nice. Up here, we're going to be doing linseed oil on the top of this for the next, well, you know, I'll be down here every day for a while putting a little linseed oil on there until it don't absorb it anymore. And you always do that on the top end grain, but you can see it's a nice tight fit all around. It's hung beautifully, just the way I like it. The handle came out absolutely beautiful. Look at the grain on there. Now this is 2 coats of amber shellac. And you could see all the grain. We're able to take that crack. Now, there was a little crack there. What we did is you open up that crack with a razor blade, get under there, and then you feed some epoxy under it, and then you clamp it down. So that's sealed up, and that'll never give you a problem again. But everything came out really nice. The head looks really nice here. It's all polished out, waxed, and I love this hammer now, you know, and we were able, like I said, to keep the Billings. That was amazing to me because I thought that would have to come off, but it didn't. And then the red over here, that's a kind of a stain, just like we did a little bit of paint, like a 50-50 paint and paint thinner, mineral spirits. Wipe it on, taped it off, so we got that line perfect without any bleed, which is a real nice. It just looks like something that would be originally out of the Billings factory back then, or in a toolkit or something. Really love this hammer. Hope you do too. Brian, thanks so much. It's a tribute to your grandfather. And everybody have a nice day. Take care now. Bye-bye.